Hey, good afternoon everybody. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, Living the Dream Racing. Put up a video update just a couple days ago. Actually, I think it was yesterday. I can't keep track of time anymore. Letting you know about the new car, showing you a little bit of it. Just gave you a quick scan of it. And I said I'd be doing some tech with you guys. So I wanted to go ahead and show that to you now. So yeah, the car is kind of in pieces. It looks like it exploded. Trust me, it didn't. Sometimes in order to get things how you want them, you gotta take everything apart and then put it back together again. Kind of a hot rodders thing, you know how it goes. But anyway, for me to get this thing ready to go, I have to convert it over to a big block Chevrolet. It had an LS in it before. And then I've also got to move the radiator, and we got to do some things different with the fuel cell and all of that. So let me show you what's going on so far. Okay, well, last night, I didn't film it because I had other stuff going on, but last night I took my new motor plate and I made a little template like this, just out of some foam board, nothing fancy. Looks kind of hacky-ish, but you know, it is what it is. And that's my template. I invested a little bit of money into a mock-up block. This particular one is a big block Chevrolet representation. It's available from Summit Racing. This block is well worth the money because it gives you all the external dimensions of a big block without having to deal with the weight and the bulk of an engine. So what I did is, to get this in the chassis and get it everything, I got my bolts in the bell housing. I had to use a little bit of spacers because the way these things hold together is these little tabs fit through slots and you can tap them down. It's actually pretty rigid. It doesn't look like it is, but it's actually pretty rigid. But those tabs space it out away from the motor plate just a little bit. So I put some washers in behind here to take up that additional space. So this thing is basically sitting flush against the motor plate. The other thing that I did was I had to do a measurement from the front of the motor plate, the rear motor plate, or the mid plate, whatever you want to call it, all the way to the front or the back side of the front motor plate. And I did that on my engine, sitting right here. I went ahead and I measured from the bell housing surface back here all the way up to the back of the front motor plate to get a dimension. Now, what it is with that dimension is that's the length that I need to go ahead and mount my new motor plate. Now, the new engine, or the mock-up, actually came out right to that dimension, sitting on top of these little tabs up front, because they got them up front too. So it's sitting on those tabs, and that lines it up perfectly with the dimension that I had off the block. Okay, so the next thing I did is I took just a piece of foam board, just like this, $6 at Michael's, and I went ahead and I laid my motor plate out on it, and I traced out my motor plate. Now, one thing I did find, didn't realize this until after I'd measured it, if you see, I've got a center line mark right here, and if I showed you the front of the motor plate, you'll notice that it's not perfectly centered. So what I did on the motor plate is I measured end to end, split that in half, and that's where that measurement is. However, that's not exactly correct. That measurement is not correct. So this motor plate was not cut evenly from side to side. It's not a big deal because most of it's getting cut away anyway. So what I did is I went ahead and lined that mark up, cut this to size, and then I used the motor plate to trace out the water pump holes, the other engine mount holes here. There's a locating hole right here and all of that stuff. And then what I did is I took and I made a line. I did some measurements and I made a line right here on this plate where the very top of the tubing in the saddles meets. So right here, if I set this motor plate in place, my mock-up motor plate, if I set it in place, this line right here where it's cut will sit right on the top of the inside of my saddles. So this right here would be the top of the arch, okay? And then of course it would be hollowed out around it like this. I cut these like this so I could move this a little bit back and forth and get it aligned just right. Now you'll notice my high-tech ratchet strap that I have here. Some brilliant engineering went along with this. One thing about it is when you hang a block off of a motor plate, it will bend the motor plate, and even this thing does a little bit. So I had to sit there and finesse it back and forth just a little bit, and eventually what I did is I got it so it's perfectly level in the chassis. Everything lines up just right the way it's supposed to, and I'm using this to support it, because since this thing doesn't weigh a whole lot, it does have some weight to it, but not a whole lot. I mean, it's not too bad. I did that so I've got some way to support that. And then what I did is, once I had everything marked on there, I did some additional markings on here. Kind of got to eliminate it, but these are the important ones. So right here, again, would be the top of the tubing. You can see I've got, kind of hard to see a little bit, I got the tubing inscribed right here for the size of tubing that I have, and right here. So these are the center lines of my frame mounts and the frame, and this is where the motor plate's going to sit on the saddles right here. So whenever I drop this motor plate in, this will be sitting on top of the saddle, and then the tab, the mounting tab, will come up here, and I'll mark it for the hole, and then I'll drill the holes to bolt it in. And then all of these holes at that point are lined up perfectly with the motor plate, and everything there will be in line. And then all I have to do is finish trimming this the way I want it trimmed, and then the motor plate will be fit. And then of course, again, I'll test fit it once everything's in to make sure it's all there. Now, I don't have hole saws this exact diameter. I've got slightly larger, I've got slightly smaller. But the advantage to that is I'm going to use the slightly smaller hole saw to cut both of these holes, and then I'm going to go ahead and remove enough material to allow the motor plate to sit down onto the frame rails, and then I'm going to slowly with the die grinder work on removing the excess material until this thing sits exactly the way it's supposed to sit. So it'll take a little bit of time, a little bit of back and forth, and a little bit of trial and error, but it should fit. It should be okay. Now, I've never actually had to make a motor plate before. This is the first one I've ever had to make. Normally, every car that I've ever gotten that's had a motor plate requirement already had motor plates in it, so it wasn't a big deal. But this is how I'm doing it. I don't know if it's right or not. The only thing that matters is if it fits, then it ships. So once I've got it all cut out, then I'll go ahead and test fit it again, put everything in place, and then I'll leave this mock-up motor with the motor plate on it in the car, because there's some other stuff that I need to do as far as clearancing goes and mock-up that I need. And it's just a lot easier with this because it's easy to get in and out of the car. It's fairly lightweight, and it just makes it easier to move around. So that's where we're at with that. Now I got to readjust this. It's kind of relaxed just a bit, but that's okay. One thing I had to check on the car was from the face of here back to the coupler distance right here. I had to check that because in the transmission, with the coupler, drive coupler fully collapsed, this is the transmission that I got with the car, from right here to right here, I've got a specific distance, and I don't have a lot of extra room to get the transmission in and out with the coupler. And the one issue that I have, or I thought I was going to have, come over here, you see my big mess here in the garage, I'm working on cleaning that up, is dowel pins. These guys right here. I run extended length dowel pins. The problem with these, if you get them too long, is whenever you go to remove the transmission out of this car, if the dowel pins are too long, you don't have enough clearance between the drive coupler on the rear end and the drive shaft in the transmission to get it out. So I did that measurement last night, and as it sits right now, I've got just enough room to make that happen, so I don't have to do any modifications or change anything there. So we're good. Which the only thing I'd be doing was cutting off the dowel pins a little bit so they're a little bit shorter. So moving forward, I got the deflector plate, got the fuel tank down there. I wasn't going to redo the deflector plate at first, but I've since changed my mind on that. I am going to remake the deflector plate. It's going to look just like this one right here. The big difference is going to be that with the tank out, the deflector plate on my old car comes down and it follows the profile of the roll cage down to here. So that instead of going straight down like this one does, it follows that direction. and then the fuel tank is bolted to the deflector plate. So I'm going to make that change on this one by making a new deflector plate and bolting it in there like that, because I have very limited room between here and here to work with. And as you can see on my engine, I've got a lot going on. I've got a vacuum pump, I got my fuel pump, I got my dry sump and the fuel regulators and stuff. And I'm going to have to do some work on this to reconfigure things a little bit. But by doing that, changing the deflector plate and moving it so it follows the contour of the cage, that opens up the front of the engine enough that I have room for everything up there and I don't have to move anything. So I might still have to do some rearranging for a couple things. And one of the things that I'm planning on putting on this car that I haven't been running, I've wanted to, but I haven't been, is an alternator. I have the alternator, I have the brackets and everything, but the reason I haven't been running is I didn't have room between the other frame rails on my old car to put it in. On this one I do. But what's going to happen is I'm going to have to take my crank trigger and I'm going to have to move it underneath the engine, and then I'm also going to have to take my timing sensor and it's going to have to get moved over. And by moving those sensors over there, that opens up this area right here. Because my alternator, because of my oil pan, my alternator has to get mounted backwards. And here's the drive pulley for that. So it's going to stick out here a little bit. Not quite as far as the fuel pump right there, but it's still going to have to stick out a little bit. Now I have a bracket that I got from, not directly from Killer Ron's, but the guy that makes them for Killer Ron's. I can't remember the name of the company right now. But he sent me a bracket that I'll be able to use to incorporate that. And I've just got to get things figured out as far as the arrangement of how everything's going to go on here. So a little bit of work to do yet, but the big thing was getting the motor plate set up so I could actually drop the engine in when it's time. Now, engine's not going in right away. Intake's coming off, heads are going to come off here later this winter. I'm put new head gaskets on it because I want to check out some stuff, put new intake gaskets on it. Gonna roll it over, probably replace the bearings, or at least give them a good look and make sure everything's okay. So we're just gonna do a quick freshen up on it, make sure everything's happy and nothing's an issue. And then also going to go ahead and rebuild my barrel valve. So it's all fresh, and then we'll be good. Also going to be rebuilding my vacuum pump, and I'll show you guys how I do that. And then we're going to a different breather setup. I'm getting rid of this breather. And then what's going to also happen is I was pulling way too much oil through my vacuum pump. Star vacuum pumps do not like oil. Okay, they're not like a Moroso. These guys do not like oil. They like to pull dry air, or as dry of air as you can get. My location of the bung, I put this here because it was the only place on this valve cover here in the front that I had rocker clearance. That was the only place I had rocker clearance. The problem is I put a lot of oil up top of my engines. There's a lot of people say, oh, you need to restrict the oil. You need to keep oil down in the bottom end. I don't have an oiling issue. I do have a lot of oil in the top end. And the problem with this was I was pulling about a quart of oil per run every time I went down the track. And as a result, you know, the vacuum pump's not working as efficiently as it could have been. So what's going to happen is we're going to weld this hole up right here. We're going to move the bung over to this valve cover over here, this flat spot right here where you see my thumb at. And we're going to run the vacuum line across, and then we're going to put the Star system, the Star's vacuum pump tank system that they have onto the car. So this thing's only pulling dry air, or as dry of air as I can get. You know, there's going to be moisture and a little bit of oil vapor, but it'll be mostly dry air. And it should also do a much, much better job of evacuating the crankcase. I want to pull about 18 inches of vacuum minimum on this thing. And by doing that, that should get it back where it's supposed to be. I was only pulling about 9 inches, and it needs to pull more than that. One other thing I'm looking at right now is I was hoping to use this fuel tank, and I've been looking at it, and there's a couple of issues that I have. First off, I don't have enough bungs in the top of the tank for the amount of returns that I have in my fuel systems, both my nitrous and my engine. The outlet bung on the tank is only a -8, I think, or a -10, and it needs to be a -12 for both fuel pumps. The other thing is capacity. I think this is only like a 4-gallon tank or something like that. Maybe it might be a little bit more than that, but I had almost a 7-gallon tank in my other car, and I was running into very close to having an issue with running out of fuel if I had to run the car for too long. So what I've decided to do, and I haven't figured out everything yet, but I'm going to mount a fuel tank up front. Now I've got a nice big open bay right here where I got plenty of room to mount the tank. I've already figured out what tank that I want to get. I just have to figure out the plumbing. It's going to be, I got a couple issues with plumbing that I got to deal with, and then that'll take care of that. But that solves the tank problem, and it also solves the clearance problem that I have in the front of the engine. The rest of it is I'm going to be taking all the electronics out of the other car, transferring them over to here. The wiring that I'm going to be doing is going to be a little bit different than this. I was going to utilize this stuff here that Joe, the guy that built the car, put in here. He did a really nice job wiring this car. The thing is not all wiring harnesses fit all applications. So you kind of have to customize them to make them work for your stuff. And what I got to looking at is I've been running relays like this with fuses on a relay block for a long time, and I've never really had any issues. But at the same time, it kind of limits you on how you can do things. And I've been looking into it a lot. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called a power distribution module. I'm going to get one from RacePack, their smart wire system, and I'm going to be wiring that in. And once I get that and I get it here, I'll show you guys how that works, how it gets wired up, and what I can do with it. It's cool as shit. It's the things you can do with it are pretty crazy, and it's pretty interesting. The other thing I got to do is remove my pile. You can see I've got a pretty good pile of stuff going right here, notes and stuff. But this is the new dashboard. This plate here is the new dashboard. I've already got it marked out. I've already got everything lined out. I just need to cut out the dash itself and then take it and have it bent. And then I got to put it in here. I got to put it in the car. I'm going to have to mark it for the steering column to come through, and then put it into place and mark it for where it's going to be bolted up at. But we're going to put a new dash in here, and the way I'm going to do the controls is very different. I'll show you guys that when I get to that point. And it's going to be really clean. It's going to be really sharp looking. And once I get all the fab done on the motor plates, I get the fab done on the dash and everything, I'm thinking about having them dipped. Not sure what pattern yet or anything else, but I'm thinking about having them dipped so they look really nice. But anyway, so that's what I've got for updates so far. Once I get a little bit more progress on the motor plate, I'll show you guys that. I'm going to spare you a lot of the grinding and the cutting and all of that stuff. I'll include some of it, but not all of it. But anyway, that's the latest updates on the car. Please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you want to see. Let me know what I can show you, do better, all that good stuff. Please tell your friends about my channel. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. And let's try to get this out there. We got another season coming up this next year. We've got a championship to defend, and we've got a new car to defend it in. So we got some stuff to figure out between now and then. But anyway, thanks guys for tuning in. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.